there's a massive divide among people who say things are not good, we need to fix them, and other people saying everything's fine, we're not changing anything. So that has all been really, really highlighted, especially here in the States, although it's impacted the entire world. How do we, or is there anything we specifically need to do, or is this something that we're evolving into, whether other people like it or not?
Yeah, both. I think there is an evolution going on that also through the globalization, 8 billion people on the planet, technology puts us into a global village. So somehow the out there, before we took toxic waste and we put it somewhere out there. Slowly, we see that out there is in here. It always was in here in our bio and ecosystem, but now it's painfully clear that it's in here. So we cannot just anymore postpone our issues or put them out there because they're always in here, because it becomes a global village. So that's the evolutionary part. I think that it's that the spirit of the time forces us to meld certain identity structures in humanity that are not relevant anymore and develop new structures that are evolutionary wise much more intelligent, and we need global collaboration. On the way there we also need to do something, which means I believe the fragmentation, when we look in society, we see always fragmentations. It's like the Grand Canyon. One person is here and says, I'm right. One person is here and says, I'm right. And both believe that they're right. But how did we get to two sides of the canyon? Because down here, deeper in our nervous systems, in our experiences, there is a fragmentation. Trauma always creates a fragmentation that creates a separation. So I feel separate when I'm triggered, when my trauma gets activated. I feel separate from you. I feel you more distant. I other you. And because I get scared and I project my fear onto you. And then we already kind of not anymore in the same warm and open and compassionate relation as we are now. And those elements live in us for the rest of our life if we don't go beyond the symptoms. And I think what we see very often that in society we want to take care of the symptoms, but we don't know often how to go to the depth. When a traumatized client or patient comes to us and expresses trauma symptoms, we know, okay, these are symptoms, but that's not the trauma. The trauma sits somewhere much deeper in the body as tensions and contractions and chronic stress, and then in the emotions as numbness or as hyper emotionality, and in the mind as disconnected interpretation systems that try to control the physical emotional system. And so the symptoms that we experience in our life is like smoke, and we need to develop a sense for where we find a fire. And often we are in the smoke, but we are not getting to the fire. And that's why it keeps repeating itself, because trauma is like a repetitive pattern. If it's unconscious, it's bound to repeat. And that's what I think what we see in society. So what we can do is that we learn more and more and we spread education how to turn towards the fire slowly and appropriately and in community, and not stay in the on the level of the smoke, because here we are just coughing together, but we are not seeing anything in the smoke. So we will stay in the symptomatic treatment of trauma and not in the real treatment of trauma. Also, culturally or as a society.
Mhm. Yeah, so I love how you talk about trauma being it's sort of this frozen, stuck thing that we're not even aware of. So the question then, of course, is if we're not aware of it, how do we address it?
How we address it is, I think, that we learn to see that a globally pandemic trauma symptom, is that the mind, the emotional experience, and the physical experience are not synchronized many times during our day. So that I'm able to say things, that we are able to read self help books, but not being able to help ourselves often through those self help books is a symptom of trauma. There are so many people that read so many books, and if that knowledge would heal us, we would already be healed. But obviously, that's not happening. So somebody can have a PhD in attachment trauma, but still be very traumatized in one's own personal experience. So that knowledge is very important, but is not necessarily going deep down into the physical, emotional experience of the trauma that lives in the nervous system. And so, and in our bodies, and is stored at certain levels of our development, or the ancestral development, as we are also looking at here. So, the ancestors are not gone, they are here with us, like they live in us. And when we, first of all, that we learn to listen, that when the mind, emotion, and the body does not convey the same information, which we call coherence, that my thinking is a physical, emotional, mental process. It's one message. So what I say is what I feel, is what I feel in my body. But if my emotions are numb and my body is tight, and I'm saying something that is not congruent with what I feel, it seems like that we often, you know, our communication happens on the mental level, but the physical level is already separate than the emotional level. And that small, like in daily life, these are small moments that happen in every board meeting, in every team meeting, in every hospital, in every, everywhere, in every school. But it's a pandemic symptom that became so normal. When I grew up, I didn't have post-it stickers every time that showed me, Thomas, this is a trauma sign. Thomas, this is a trauma sign. Thomas, this is a trauma sign. I didn't get that. So I thought, okay, that's how people are. That's how the world looks like. But that's not how the world looks like. That's how a traumatized world looks like. And of course, the world is not entirely traumatized, but to a certain extent. And that suddenly people become very reactive or very aggressive or very numb or very mute, and they don't have a voice in society. It looks like, oh, that's how life is. But no, that's how life is when it's hurt. And more than that, the most hurt part of our world is silent. This, because I often say the deepest pain is mute. And it needs all of us to go to look for where the deepest pain is mute, because many people that are really hurt cannot speak. And they cannot even say that they're really hurt. So that and so when we learn to develop skills, relational skills, that's not the good news, that relational skills and presence are the two remedies for trauma. A skillful relating and understanding that not history is the past, but the unintegrated history is the split of experience that creates a past, and it's calling for an illusionary future to integrate itself. So many of our patterns in life, they are repetitive. So we have the same conversation with our intimate partner that we had already 3 days ago, the same argument, or last week. So that's not the future, that's a repetition of the past. So when I'm in that conversation, I'm actually in the past because I had that already. And so I think that when we understand that presencing, becoming more present, and that's where many mindfulness techniques or embodiment techniques and precise relation, when we can train that, and through relating, we find out where we are not related really and not regulated. And if we can create more awareness in communities where we come together and we practice certain things that help us to see the real trauma more, then together we can see more, because you can see things in me that I can see, and I can see maybe things in you that you can see, because where we are unconscious, as you said, we can't see each other, ourselves, and also not each other. But where you are not traumatized, you can maybe support me, and vice versa. And so community is a very good way to mirror what we can see back to one another. And so there, I think community, relation, presence, these are the remedies, and mindfulness practices to be more present through contemplative and meditative practices. And of course, then for deeper and more complex trauma, we need specialists that, really studied and learned that. But there's something that the society can also take over as collective competencies.
Thank you for that. There's so much to chew on there. First of all, I want to acknowledge what you said about, we all read all these books. If that was all it took, we would all be levitating at this point because we've all read
That's
so
good.
much. We've all worked so hard on this. Um, so let's take what you were just saying and dive a little deeper into the individual's process. If they want to, I mean, we all recognize what collective trauma is, hopefully, and we can see the bigger picture. But when it comes to our individual issues, you mentioned noticing patterns. What are some other ways that people who are not just beginning this work, but people who are already deeply into it, what are some tools that you use for specifically ancestral healing?
Yeah, we use like what we study a lot. Also, we have like a bigger group of therapists that study with us in the trainings, and then we have like large trainings where we. Um, I'm looking for a way to make it simple, and so it looks like that when people are in the same room, that they are kind of related. But when we look at there are two building blocks that create the basis for relation. One is the basic building block of relating is that I feel you and I feel how you feel me. I feel you how you feel me. That's the basic attachment wiring for kids, and that's the basic relational presence that we bring as grown-ups into a relation, into a team, into a group, into a society as a citizen, that I am in an experiential relation with my environment, also with nature, with the biosphere. When certain parts of me are hurt, in my hurt parts, I cannot feel you, and I also cannot feel you how you feel me, because my relation is hurt. So trauma hurts relating. And so that means that I lose my felt experience of you. Then I need to start to think more because I need to compensate on what I can't feel. I can't feel anymore what you feel in your body. I can't feel anymore what you feel emotionally. So I need to ask you, hey, Lisa, what are you feeling? But in a non traumatized world, I don't need to ask you because I can feel it. I can feel your emotional body through emotional resonance. That's our natural state. That we need to ask each other what we are feeling is already a trauma symptom. My body can sense your body. But if my body is hurt and my nervous system is closed and I feel more contracted and held, I can't feel you. So you feel to me more distant. And in that distance, all kinds of relational frictions, conflicts, projections happen. So what we do is we practice like a presencing practice, so to learn over time to become more present with the current sensations in our body, with the current sensations emotionally, with our thought process, with others, as far as it's possible. And then we developed a body of work. So I often say that if, let's say, somebody has been traumatized at age 5, so the developmental energy of age 5 and the development of the nervous system at that level experienced an overwhelming experience that that child couldn't process, and it split off a part of the nervous system to hold that overload in order to continue living and developing. So from that moment on, we created two. And that two-ness is split of energy, but that two-ness is also the place where we get triggered, and it's the place where questions arise. I often say a question and an answer, always two. And the answer usually comes through integration. And then the energy can develop further and become mature. But since trauma is frozen, that split of part in the person is frozen. So when the person has like lives in a family system and the child is triggering the father or the mother, the father or the mother can't respond anymore as a grown-up person because they get triggered. So they start to respond like a 5-year-old. And if their relationship dynamics the same, so we call that regression. So when we do this interpersonal work, we looked at that when a client tells me about their symptoms, my nervous system goes to look where is the trauma stored, at which level of age in the person's body can we find the storage of the trauma. And so I speak to a 40-year-old person, and at the same time, I'm relating to the 5-year-old traumatized aspect. And so we create, like in parenting, we are grown ups, but we can talk to a child as we talk to a child. So we call this the elevator of consciousness, so that I can offer specific relation while I'm holding a grown up space. And that's something we can train. And of course, I can do it only when my nervous system is open and responsive. I can't do it where I'm traumatized myself. And what we see is that that invites the trauma into a deeper integration and a maturation. The same is true when we work on ancestral trauma, that when I feel you, and then you tell me about your life, and then I feel okay, like let's say your grandmother experienced the trauma, and the energy of the traumatization is still in you, but at the level of your grandmother. So if I can go in my own nervous system and feel what seems like your past and include it in our meeting, then we bring relation, not just cognitive understanding. I understand that your grandmother got traumatized. No, I can feel and connect to your grandmother on that level. And I think everybody who has that open relational quality can create a bridge of the original trauma and whatever is the active symptom in your life today. And like this, we create like a coherence function that creates integration as a possibility. And I believe the same, we are working with the same principle. For example, Germany 1941, in the middle of the war, is also like a file in the collective consciousness that holds a lot of information. Usually, our attention is totally somewhere else with our daily life, what we have to do with our work, with our families, but it doesn't mean that that file is not active. So that storage of unintegrated information is still in the collective subconscious and it's active there. It's doing things, but without our awareness. That's why there are unconscious societal processes or unconscious individual symptoms that are being fueled by that past. And so I think it's a lot about learning the sensing, the system sensing on a relational level and the system sensing on a collective level, that cognition and sensing become one function. And I think that's a very powerful way to work on the integration of trauma and also in a safe way because we feel what's appropriate, how much is appropriate, and how fast we can go through sensing.